You're listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus of the Lotri Foundation. In this podcast, Shaykh Zahir explains the aphorisms from Ibn Ata'illah's famous book of wisdoms, Al-Hikam Al-Ata'iyah, a classical manual of spiritual development. Visit seekershub.org for online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما بفضلك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So, Shaykh Ibn Ata'illah Iskandari, this great scholar, he said, we're going through this book. He says, لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار ما دمت في هذه الدار فإنما أبرزت إلا ما هو مستحق وصفها وواجب نعتها. So he said, Ibn Ata'illah Rahmatullah alayhi, he said concerning how to view one's relationship and what happens to one in this world. Because all the times we have to put things that happen in our lives in this dunya. Here we have to put into perspective. One of the perspective that you can put things that happen in this world is you can put into perspective what happens to you in accordance to this world. You can weigh it against this world. You can weigh what happens to you here against what happens in this world associated with other people. If you do that, you'll be miserable. You'll have anxiety and you'll fall into depression. Because if you weigh what happens to you against this world, then you're going to compete in it. And you're going to see unfairness in it. You're going to see if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes one to get sick, you're going to weigh your sickness against other people that you see are healthy. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes you poverty, if He causes one poverty, you're going to weigh it against other people who you see having wealth or affluent, and you're going to feel something because you're weighing what happens to you in this world against other things in this world. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a perspective. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to weigh what happens to us in this world to the next world. If you weigh what happens to you in this world against the next world, then what happens? A, you know that everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what you know. B, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised in this world hardship. And you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who will bring about ease. So one does not reflect when one weighs what happens to one simply because of what's around one. One weighs it in association with the akhirah and what the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So keeping that in mind, Ibn Ata'illah, he says, لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار ما دمت في هذه الدار. He says, don't find it strange that things occur that upset one, that upsetting things occur. Don't find it strange. لا تستغرب. Don't find it odd that upsetting things will happen. Upsetting things happen while you are still in this world. You're still in this abode. You're in the dunya. So don't find it strange that things are that you don't like will occur here in this dar, in this abode. فإنها ما أبرزت إلا ما هو مستحق وصفها وواجب نعتها. And so Because what happens, for it manifests nothing, it brings about nothing, abrazat, that it manifests and becomes plain to you, right? It manifests nothing besides what it entails, its own attribute, except what entails its own attribute. Meaning what? That we live here in this dunya, and the dunya has wasf, it has characteristics. This dunya, this pearl that we live in, has characteristics. If it becomes manifest to you, meaning that it afflicts you, the wasf, the characteristics or the traits of this world, then that's what happens. Because that's what it manifests. It manifests its own attributes. This world manifests its own attributes. The attributes of the world is what the Prophet ﷺ has told us, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us. And it is what the Prophet ﷺ said of this world, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said of this world. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said of this world, that this world is وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ, that this world is mata', that it's sensory things, it's tangible things, ghurur, that come to deceive one, that comes to leave one in a state of ghurur, that there's deception in it, that you don't know the reality of it. So you may think something is beautiful and it's not. They think something is benefiting you and it's not. You may something is good to achieve and it's not. You may think something is worthy of competing over and it's not. Because it's ghurur. Because at the end of the day, you don't leave anything back. You don't leave anything here. At the end of the day, as the Prophet ﷺ says, that the dunya is the sijn al-mu'min, that this world is the prison of the believer. This world is the prison of the believer. It's the prison of the believer because there are restrictions in it. Because there are things that we cannot do in it. And there are things that we're guiding ourselves through, that we just can't do anything that we want or anything that pleases us, that we just can't run after everything that we want to without consequences. There's consequences to running after, to competing over, to vying with, to trying to gain things at all costs. There are consequences. Just like there's consequences for people who break the law. There's consequences. So this world, the Prophet ﷺ, it's a prison to the believer, and it's Jannah lil kafir, and it's the paradise for the believers, or disbelievers, because they can do anything they want in it. Because their belief does not guide them. Their belief does not restrict them. Their belief is not restrictive for what reason? The restrictiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the restrictiveness is for the akhirah, for the benefit of the next world. The restrictiveness is for us to do what? For us to gain a understanding that the next world is way better than this world. That's the restrictiveness that we have to go through. So why, if difficulties come, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that difficulty will come. Allah has told us that difficulties will come. Bala, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises in the Quran that difficulties is going to come. As He says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, that certainly we will try you. We will afflict you with something out of fear, and something out of hunger, and something out of loss of wealth, and something out of loss of your lives, وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, and something out of the loss of your profit, or the things that you find, thamar, that you try to gain in this world. And some of the ulama, like Imam Shafi says, children, thamarat. You'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will try you with these things. You'll be afflicted with these things. And these things are things that People, in this world at least, this is what people try to avoid. And this is what they get distressed over, or they fall into anxiety over, or they become very depressed, or have severe sadness over the loss of these things, because they put these things as their goal. These things become their goal. They become the pinnacle of success. These things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will try you over. So the world is filled with trials. That's the world. The world is filled with trials, and it's filled with difficulties. Because why? Because that's the wasf of it. Because that's the trait of it. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. He created it, and He created it with its trials. And no one escapes it. There's no one that escapes the trials of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether the trials are internal or whether the trials are external, the trials are there. And no one's going to escape it, because that's the trait of this world. That's the trait of the world. So no one's going to escape it. No one's going to escape it. The Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said the entirety of the world is distress. Radiallahu anhu. The entirety of the world, he says, is complete distress. Is complete distress. And so if happiness comes out of it, he says, if happiness ever comes out of this world, because the entirety is distress. The entirety of this world, he says, is distress. So if happiness comes out of it, then it's a secondary gain. It's a secondary gain. Meaning that it's a gain that you should not look forward to. It's not a gain you should look forward to. Loss is what you should look forward to. Difficulty is what you should look forward to. Not hope for it, because we never hope for difficulties. You never ask for difficulties. You never hope for distress. No. But when it comes, you shouldn't be shocked. It shouldn't be strange to you. You shouldn't question, why did this happen? Why has this occurred? Well, I've prayed all my life. I've prayed all 5 salah. I do this. I'm a good person. I treat people well. I donate. And why did this happen? It shouldn't be strange to you that it happens, because that's the trait of the world. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that He promises us fear and hunger, loss of wealth, loss of lives, loss of thamr, loss of what we want, that promise is not to just poor people. That promise is not to just practicing believers. That promise is not to sinful believers only. That promise is to every single person. That promise. That promise of وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, the kum here, you, is everyone. There's no exception. There's no exception given in the verse that we will cause you distress, or we will afflict you, only the sinners. No, everyone. Everyone will afflict you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's everyone. The kum means everyone. So don't think because you are, or we are, or whoever is, the great believer, that affliction is not going to happen. Affliction will happen, and that will test your faith. Affliction will happen to sinners, and it will test them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to come back. Allah wants them to come back. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests the believers who are fully practicing with distress, because that's a test of their mettle, the faith. That's the test of their faith. Are they going to question Allah even though they are the perfect believer? Are they going to question their faith even though they were praying? Then what is their salah if they do that? What was their salah like? What was their sum? What was their good acts? What was their charity? Why were they doing it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test the believer's faith with difficulties that will come. And so this is what happens to the believer. So he says, Ibn Ata'illah, he says, don't find it upsetting that things will occur while you're still in this world. Don't find it strange that difficulty is going to come. Meaning that you should deal with it properly and not fall into anxiety or distress or sorrow, when difficulties come. You go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues the verse in Quran when He promises difficulty. وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after telling us that He will afflict and the believers with these things that He mentions, He says, وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. So give glad tidings to the ones who are patient. They're patient with what? With the bala. And they're patient with Allah. They're patient with their difficulties, and they're patient with Allah. They don't blame Allah, but they go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. When a difficulty hits them or afflicts them, they remind themselves, and they remind themselves that we came from Allah, and to Allah is our return, that we're going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they're more avid in their ibadah when affliction hits them. They don't second guess all of their works that they did and why they did it. No, they become even more avid for their ibadah. They become even more keen to do even more and to continue in their ibadah. They don't question, why was I doing all of this when this has occurred? No, they don't question that. No, they become even more avid. Those are the believers who ibadah meant something. Their ibadah meant something, and it meant something to them. And so that's the believers. The Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that the best preparation for hardship is patience. That the best preparation for receiving difficulties or hardship is through patience, is to gain it, is to gain patience. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. So give glad tidings to the patient one, the ones who endure. Meaning that they don't have a fall off. Their ibadah and what they do and what they think of Allah. What they think of Allah does not give way, or does not become shaky, or does not become, what they think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stays strong. It stays firm, what they think of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test them in whatever way, but their resolve to worship Allah does not become unconnected or unfirm. It does not become, does not shake. They still have their full certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have full certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it does not give way to anything. And so this is what Ibn Ata'illah in this hikmah is conveying. So don't find it strange when an affliction happens to you, when something unsettling comes to you. Don't find it strange, because this is what the world is. That's what the world is. That's what the world is. As long as you live in this world, there will be difficulties. There will be difficulties. Rather than talking about it, do something. There are people who, they talk all the time about the difficulties of this world, and they talk about the politics of this world, and the politicians of this world, and what they do and what they don't do. No matter if you talk from morning until nighttime, you're not going to change anything. But if you talk to your Lord, something can change if He wills it. Talking about what happens in this world is useless unless there's a benefit to help someone avoid certain things, or to be in trouble on certain things, depending on the hukam, depending on the hukuma, the government, and their stipulations and so on. That's benefit. But talking about useless and immoral things like politics and politicians is useless, because you can be talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who can change it. The person that you talk to about politics can't change anything. Can't change anything. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can change it. So you might as well talk to Allah, and wasting your time talking to people about it, because people can't change anything. Most things in this world people can't change. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can change it. So we might as well stick to conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what the Prophet ﷺ did. He conversed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ did not sit when battles were occurring. He did not sit before the battle and strategize much. This is one of the interesting facts. He sat to strategize, but it didn't take long. It did not take long. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ most of the time was conversing with Allah. As is narrated, before every battle, he used to stay up all night and pray. He used to stay up all night and pray before every single battle. The Prophet ﷺ. He used to stay up all night and pray, because the only one that can solve the issue or give success is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he did not stay up all night strategizing. He stayed up all night and he conversed with his Lord. And so if you have difficulties or you face difficulty and you want to change, then converse with the one who can change it. Converse with the one who can change it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and guide us, forgive us, have mercy upon us, forgive our elders, our parents, grant them the best of this world, the best of the hereafter. Those who are sick, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal them and cure them. Those who have passed away, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them His mercies, maghfirah, and His shade on that day when there's no shade except His. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our children, keep them on the straight path, protect our families, protect our women, our sisters, our children, our men. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and save us from the fitna of this world and the fitna from those who cause harm and who would like to cause harm to the believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve us and protect us from them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from their fitna. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the fitna of this world. Help us to have patience in dealing with the difficulties of this world and the stresses of this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and protect our homes. Make our homes from amongst the homes of the believers, and make our last words our best words. Subhanaka wa hamdik, shadu wa la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Ameen.
Thank you for listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.